Okay, today we'll be doing an install on an ISX-15 Cummins with the new PDI Big Boss intake manifold, which also fits the CM2350 ISX Cummins from 2014 to 2018. The first step, we'll take components off the stock intake manifold, starting with the charge air cooler intake piping. Next, we'll move into the intake throttle valve, removing that from the stock intake. Upon removing the intake throttle valve, on the back side will be the clip for the electronic harness. Take note, on the electric harnesses they do have a safety latch as well as a cover. Unfasten the safety latch, then unplug the harness. Next, we will remove the EGR crossover tube on both the intake and exhaust sides of the engine. Remove the EGR crossover tube completely and set aside for reinstallation. We will lift the hold downs for the fuel lines and the electrical harness. Using a pry tool, gently lift them from the stock intake manifold. At this stage, you need to disconnect the electrical harness from the boost pressure sensor. Zip tying the harness out of the way makes for easier installation. With the harness out of the way, the fuel line hold down bolts are easily accessible to be removed from the intake. The fuel line does have a little bit of flexibility. Ensure toward the back side of the engine the fuel line does not get caught on the intake manifold upon removal. Next, we remove the tie downs for the oil dipstick tube and the air line from the bottom side of the intake. Now the path should be clear to unbolt the factory intake from the engine. Pull the blow-by tube loose and tuck behind to make clearance for the intake manifold for removal. Once the bolts are removed, the intake should come out fairly easily. Pay attention to the fuel line as it slides off the engine. Once the factory intake manifold is removed, there are several ports that need to have plugs swapped from the old intake to the new Big Boss intake. Being a factory replacement, it is very easy to see and transfer the parts as needed. Transferring the boost pressure sensor, be sure to lubricate the O-ring. Only the O-ring upon reinstallation into the new intake manifold. In the box with the new Big Boss intake manifold will be a new gasket kit for use on installation of the new intake manifold. Set the new gasket in place. The new PDI Big Boss intake manifold should slide right into place just like the stock manifold come off. While installing the new intake manifold, assure your gasket is lined up and hand tighten all bolts around the intake. We have found once all of the bolts are hand tightened and you begin to torque the bolts, do the sides first, then move to the middle bolts and torque them all. Reattach the blow-by tube by simply putting back into place and moving the clamp back into its position. Reattach airline hold down and oil dipstick tube hold down on the bottom side of the new intake. Reattach fuel line hold downs in the same location as they were removed from the factory intake. Remove the zip ties from the electrical harness to start putting the hold downs back in the same locations. Once the harness hold downs are back in place, be sure to plug in the boost pressure sensor. Reattach the electrical harness for the intake throttle valve, putting the safety slide back in place and the cover back over the electrical attachment. Reinstall the intake throttle valve. Reinstall charge air cooler intake piping and ensure clamps are tight. Reinstall EGR crossover tube on both the intake and exhaust side, including the tie down on the top side of the valve covers. You have successfully installed your new PDI Big Boss intake manifold and are ready to experience the increase in performance and efficiency. To learn more about PDI Big Boss products, you can visit pdidiesel.com or give us a call and a member of our sales staff would gladly assist you.